Today I'm joined by Trewin Restorick, CEO of Global Action Plan. Trewin, thank you for sparing the time today. Before we talk about Global Action Plan, can you tell me a little bit about what you were doing before you started the UK operation?
Yeah, before Global Action Plan, my immediate job was I was working at Friends of the Earth. I was head of fundraising at Friends of the Earth, trying to raise money for their environmental campaigns. And that's really where I started to get interested in environmental issues, particularly around energy and waste. And before that, rather bizarrely, I worked down in Plymouth with Plymouth City Council at a time when the big naval dockyard down there was shrinking rapidly. And my role was to try and find new businesses for the city. So I guess what I did at Global Action Plan was bring together a really keen environmental interest, but also an interest in sort of creation of jobs and enterprise and things. So those were the two things that brought me to the organisation.
Thank you. Can you summarise what Global Action Plan is and what it offers, please?
Yeah, I think it comes out of the work I did at Friends of the Earth. I became sort of passionately convinced that we needed to change what we're doing because of the environmental problems we were facing. But Friends of the Earth was an organisation which was out there campaigning, trying to stop things. And I got a feeling that there were more and more people who were starting to realise that there was a problem and they were actually looking for solutions. So I guess what Global Action Plan is an organisation that helps people find solutions to the environmental problems, and not in sort of great abstract terms, but really sort of solutions that are relevant to their circumstances. So how can they live greener lives? How could they be greener in the workplace? How can their schools be greener? Sort of really practical activity and about change and innovation, really.
You started way back in 1993, before issues such as climate change, species loss and resource consumption were popular subjects with the man and woman on the street. What motivated you to start Global Action Plan?
I think it was a really naive decision looking back on it, to be honest. So I'd been in an organisation at Friends of the Earth which was sort of lived and breathed environmental issues, and I think at the time I had about 180,000 members who also believed in it. So I guess I was slightly cocooned from the real world, and therefore I thought these issues were important to the man and woman in the street. And I also thought, well, if you can create an organisation which can sort of help address environmental issues but can also help people save money, be socially enjoyable, what's the problem? So it was a rather naive mindset that I left Friends of the Earth, and I basically set up Global Action Plan. I think we had about £30,000. I didn't have an office, didn't have a computer, didn't really have anything other than an overly grand name, and I started to try and sort of call people, explain what I was doing, and I think it was then that I realised that actually it was a totally alien concept to people. And we did things like we created the first online carbon calculator in the UK, and I can remember having conversations with journalists and saying, hey, we've created a carbon calculator, and they were just completely confused about the whole concept of what's carbon, why would you measure it, why would you want this calculator thing? So you could say it was innovation, but it was actually naivety that I'd learnt a lot in the organisation I was at, and I was trying to sort of spread that message wider.
Thank you. As an early pioneer, what has been your biggest challenge?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is to try and persuade people that the issues that we were addressing are actually incredibly important and really happening. Things like climate change are contentious, they're abstract, they're not at the forefront of people's minds in their daily lives. Other the issues that we look at, things like water consumption. People don't believe that the UK has a water problem because it rains all the time. They think as soon as they put rubbish in the bin it's disappeared, so they don't think about the landfill site implications, the problems we have on our waste disposal. They think food is plentiful because they go around the supermarkets and they're not really aware that perhaps we could be facing food supply and security issues. So it's actually trying to get messages which we think are fundamentally important across to people, and for them to realise that there is an importance. And if you can't do that, you have a whole host of other problems. People don't want to give you money, people don't believe your activities are important, and it's a perpetual challenge basically to try and get issues which aren't in the mainstream into the sort of the core of people's thinking.
Thank you. What's been your most rewarding experience so far?
It's always a bit of a shock actually to sort of cycle into work in the morning into an office. We've got quite a nice office now in sort of the middle of London, and wander around and see there are 60 people here all working really hard on these issues, all incredibly committed and passionate and quite amazing. So I guess the biggest reward is the surprise that this sort of has accidentally and mysteriously happened around what was a very humble beginning. So I think there's that, but also I think getting to see large companies starting to really take this agenda very seriously. So we have very close relationships with people like Sky, O2, EDF, and these companies are fundamentally getting this issue. Change is difficult, but I think that's incredibly rewarding.
Thank you. You created the Environmental IT Leadership Team, a collection of customers, not IT vendors, to advise on sustainable IT issues. Can you say a little bit about what the leadership team is about and the role of community?
Yes, I mean, we did lots of work with businesses, and we increasingly realised that ICT had a major impact on the environment. And the information was all out there, but we just sort of brought it into the open. The fact that the ICT industry at the time had the same carbon footprint as the aviation industry really shocked the media and many people. And what we saw was that there are a lot of ICT suppliers who started to realise that they needed to talk about their green credentials. And the purchasers were a little bit sceptical about their claims, and they couldn't verify them, and they wanted to sort of seek reassurance and ideas and knowledge from each other. So the idea of the leadership team was to basically address what is a hugely important issue from the perspective of the people who actually use the stuff rather than the people who are trying to sell you stuff. And it was great to bring together what we perceived to be sort of people who are leading in that area. And just to see them share knowledge and actually be able to spread that knowledge to others. So one of the key roles of the group has always been to sort of bring out challenges, bring out new information, and talk to the sector about their perspective. And I think it's very healthy to have that independent viewpoint, which hasn't got a major seller behind it. And it's a very strong and tightly knit community, and it sort of trusts itself really. So that's why it was crucially important. And I think all we did was we played a sort of independent brokerage role, a facilitation role, and our sole viewpoint was to save carbon at the end of it.
Thank you. If you could do one or two things differently, what would they be?
I do quite a lot differently. I think the first thing we've always as an organisation lived completely hand to mouth. And I really wish that I'd spent a lot more time planning things at the beginning and asking for more money up front. People like to invest in ideas. They're less likely to invest in ideas that are sort of scratching along a bit. So I think that'll be the first thing I'd do, is that, you know, if I was starting as an entrepreneur, I'd say get as much support, backing, money as you can right at the beginning when you've still got an amazing concept or idea, because that's when people get excited and that's when they make an investment. So that would be the biggest change. I mean, we've made loads of mistakes. We rather stupidly set up a magazine called Ergo, which was I think the UK's one and only, and it's probably the reason why it's only sort of sustainable lifestyles magazine, which lost us loads of money and caused the organisation to falter quite badly. So from a business perspective, that was a really dumb decision. From a learning perspective and a sort of just an intrigue perspective, I found it a great thing to do. So I think, you know, if I was looking at it quite harshly and saying, well, if we were about making as much money as possible, there's some things I just would never have touched. But in terms of sort of an interesting journey and exploration, I think I'm quite happy to live with those mistakes.
Thank you. What are your plans for the future of Global Action Plan?
Well, we're hitting quite an interesting economic time at the moment. Sort of public expenditure is going to be cut heavily. Corporates are quite worried, I think, about a double-dip recession. They're sort of a bit cautious about their investment. And in times of recession, interest in environmental and sustainability tends to dip. So I think we're going to have a bit of a struggle externally in the next few years. So, and we have to ride with that. And I think the way we'll get through it is a number of ways. One is I want to innovate more. I think there's massive opportunities for more community resource sharing. I think it's crazy that, you know, lots of homeowners have their own lawnmowers and own power drills and stuff when, you know, you don't need it because you only use it a certain amount of time. So we can save money, we can save resource, we can build stronger communities by sharing resources a lot better. So I'd like to do more around that. I think technology's got a massive part to play in a low carbon future, and it's not really being explored enough. So I'd like to look into that. And for an organisation to survive, we've got to get even more commercially, even though we're a charity. And we create, I think, good products. What we've got to do is maximise the potential of those products, sell them, and use that money to go back and recycle into the charity so that we can do the more innovative stuff that I really want to do.
Thank you. And finally, as someone who's created and maintained a business through several periods of economic turmoil, what advice and guidance can you give to somebody who's starting out with a new product or a new service that has some form of environmental benefit?
I think you've got to be massively stubborn, pig-headed, a bit arrogant. You've got to really believe in what you're doing. But I think most of all you've got to be really aware and alert about what's happening around you. There's huge space. We're going to go through a massive change in our economy if we're going to get anywhere near the 80% cut in carbon emissions. And when you go through a period of change, and we're going through a political change as well at the moment, opportunities arise. And I think it's quite easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale of the problems, but actually there are huge opportunities, and a fleet-footed entrepreneur at the moment can make a really strong business in this drive towards a low-carbon economy. So I think sort of being fleet-footed is important. And finally, you've just got to enjoy it. You know, it has its challenges, but it's quite an amazing place to be.
Trewin Restorick, CEO of Global Action Plan, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.